It's a private company. It can do what it wants, even if that means coordinating with a government official to censor information that can literally impact
every single person on Earth.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to go ahead and disagree with you right there. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and this is a discussion we have been having on this channel for a while. Section 230 immunity. How can these private companies censor and get away with it? And everybody says, look, they're private enterprises. They can do what they want. They're not held to the Constitution as if they were a government entity. And that line has been getting progressively more and more blurred as time goes on. The big news of the week has been the release of the Fauci emails that have been released under a FOIA request. Robert Barnes and I talked about it during our last live stream. Well, today an email has surfaced that appears to be Mark Zuckerberg, the CEO of Facebook, coordinating with Fauci as to the release of certain authoritative information as relates to COVID, inviting Fauci on for a Q&A on Facebook, and to Zuckerberg's, what did he say, 100 million followers. We're going to get to it, but the bottom line is that this email, it's getting awfully and dangerously close to private enterprise colluding, cooperating, coordinating with the government such that they maybe should be starting to lose some of that 230 immunity. From Mark Zuckerberg, sent Sunday, March 15, 2020, 12:18 p.m. to Fauci, Anthony, NIH, NIAID. Subject, thanks and ideas. A few details of critical importance. Note the date that this email is sent, March 2020. For those of you who don't know, the NIH is the National Institute of Health, and the NIAID is a little more complicated. I always get that one mixed up. It is the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases, and who happens to be its director? That's right, Anthony Fauci. The header of the email is thanks and ideas, and Mark Zuckerberg is not only on a first-name basis with Dr. Anthony Fauci, he's on an abbreviated first-name basis with Tony.
Tony.
I wanted to send a note of thanks for your leadership and everything you're doing to make our country's response to this outbreak as effective as possible. I also wanted to share a few ideas of ways we could help you get your message out, but I understand you're incredibly busy, so don't feel a need to reply unless these seem interesting. I don't exactly think this requires a translation, but just in the event that a translation would benefit the viewers out there, this is basically saying, hey, Dr. Fauci, I am a private enterprise and I would like to work with the government to help you get your message out there. This is something I've said in previous vlogs. Corruption doesn't always take the form that we tend to see in the movies. There's no briefcase of cash. There's no smoking gun email. Hey, let's do something illegal. It always starts off polite, so subtle, but
everybody knows what everybody is talking about.
But wait, because it gets even better just in the second paragraph. This isn't public yet, but we're building a coronavirus information hub that we're going to put at the top of Facebook for everyone. 200 plus million Americans, 2.5 billion people worldwide, with two goals. One, make sure people can get authoritative information from reliable sources, and two, encourage people to practice social distance and give people ideas for doing this using internet tools. This will be live within the next 48 hours. Private enterprise sharing non-public information with government officials as relates to authoritative news, and this coming from the platform that reaches 2.5 billion people worldwide, as we're going to see a little later on in this vlog, that had just censored information and censored pages that may have referenced the fact or the idea that the virus may have originated in a lab in China. But we are getting ahead of ourselves. Let's just continue reading this private email between Mark Zuckerberg, CEO of Facebook, and Dr. Anthony Fauci. As a central part of this hub, I think it would be useful to include a video from you because people trust and want to hear from experts rather than just a bunch of agencies and political leaders. Just to open a slight parenthesis here, we all know that Dr. Fauci is not an elected leader, but he is a government employee, so to pretend that he is somehow an independent expert and not a member of the government, that is what we refer to as code word in order to lend legitimacy to what Mark Zuckerberg wants to set up here with a government official. This could be done in a number of formats if you're open to it. Probably best would be recording a Q&A where you answer people's top questions, but we'd be open to other formats too. I'm also doing a series of live stream Q&As with health experts to try to use my large following on the platform, 100 million followers, to get authoritative information out as well. I'd love to have you do one of these Q&As. things. This could be the video we put in the coronavirus hub, or it could be a different thing that we distribute separately, but I think it could be effective as well. Finally, redacted for B4. And what exactly is a B4 redaction? Well, before I tell you, I'm just going to make a dad joke. Exemption B4 of the Freedom of Information Act. Exemption B4 of FOIA permits agencies as a matter of discretion to withhold trade secrets and commercial or financial information obtained from a person which is privileged or confidential. And with some flattery and an ever so politeful manner, Zuckerberg goes on to end his email as follows. Again, I know you're incredibly busy, so don't feel the need to respond if this doesn't seem helpful. If it's easy to talk live, give me a call anytime on my mobile phone.
If it's easy to talk live.
Now think what you will, but anybody who is remotely familiar with how all of this works knows that when someone says, let's take this live, let's talk over the phone, it sometimes tends to be code word for let's not have a written correspondence of what we are about to talk about. And like Robert Barnes always says on our live streams, always in cash, never in writing. That seems to be what we're seeing right here at the end of this email. Thanks again for everything you're doing, Mark. Now, why might this email seem somewhat more suspicious now, a little over a year later, Mark Zuckerberg privately contacting Dr. Anthony Fauci to discuss how they can promote authoritative news on Facebook? Remember that pesky thing of a ban that Facebook imposed on any story suggesting that the coronavirus was the result of a leak from a Wuhan lab?
Pepperidge Farm remembers, but Pepperidge Farm ain't just gonna keep it to Pepperidge Farm self free of charge.
Facebook lifts ban on calling coronavirus man-made. Joe Walsh, Forbes staff. Facebook is rescinding its months-old ban on posts suggesting the coronavirus was created by humans, the social media giant announced Wednesday, as some experts argue the virus's origins remain unclear and the theory that it escaped from a research lab, an idea still short on concrete evidence, shouldn't be dismissed yet. Well, that is some mighty fine framing there, but I think we've admitted the essential. Facebook is lifting a ban on a story now that it had previously banned because it has become somewhat impossible to maintain the ban on this story. But back in the day, Zuckerberg was in touch with Dr. Anthony Fauci to discuss how they could promote authoritative news at the same time they were suppressing this information. And there are some people who think that had this story been revealed or been discussed back in 2020, it could have had potentially some positive impacts on Donald Trump running for his second term in office. And here we now have evidence being revealed of the CEO of arguably a monopoly, if not at the very least one of the biggest tech giants on Earth, with access to 1/3 of the world's population, coordinating with Dr. Anthony Fauci how they are going to release authoritative news to the public. At the same time, they are censoring information that turns out to be at the very least plausible, if not true. Information which, if released at the time, possibly could have changed at the very least the way some people might have voted. If you don't have a problem with this, we have a different standard as to what is problematic behavior and what is a problematic relationship between private enterprise and government officials. Key facts: Facebook first barred posts claiming the coronavirus is man-made or manufactured in early February, part of a wider effort to tamp down on misinformation about COVID-19 and common vaccines on its platform. The company rolled back this policy against speculating on how the virus was created Wednesday evening, citing ongoing probes into the origins of the pandemic. Oh yeah, and when it comes to the possible origins of the pandemic, who might have had some information on that at the time? We now know from other emails that have been released under this FOIA request, Dr. Anthony Fauci. In the early days of the pandemic, most health experts argued the coronavirus probably originated in animals and then jumped to humans naturally, but a handful of observers, including former President Donald Trump's allies, floated the possibility that the virus leaked from a laboratory like China's Wuhan Institute of Virology. Some experts dismissed this theory last year and argued there's little evidence to back it up, but in the last few weeks, a number of scientists and public officials have called for more scrutiny. In a letter in the journal Science 2 weeks ago, several scientists argued the lab accident hypothesis is still, quote, viable, end quote, and deserves to be studied, and President Joe Biden said Wednesday U.S. intelligence agencies haven't reached a conclusion on the lab accident theory or the animal spillover theory. You know what the biggest problem is? Dr. Anthony Fauci had some opinions and had some information on this very question. And now it would appear that he was working directly with Mark Zuckerberg to determine what was authoritative news and what was to be published and possibly to be censored. This is a problematic relationship between private enterprise and government that could warrant, hypothetically, possibly contemplating stripping these companies of their Section 230 immunity. The Supreme Court actually recently adjudicated on this very issue back in 2018. I think it was a split decision, but it is going to be fun to see some of the dissenting opinions potentially come back to haunt those who issued them. First Amendment constraints don't apply to private platforms, Supreme Court affirms. This was in Manhattan Community Access Corp. et al. Versus Halleck et al. In a case closely watched for its potential implications for social media, the Supreme Court has ruled that a non-profit running public access channels isn't bound by governmental constraints on speech. The case, which the conservative wing of the court decided in a split 5-4 ruling, centered around a Manhattan-based non-profit tasked by New York City with operating public access channels in the area. The organization disciplined 2 producers after a film led to complaints which the producers argued was a violation of their First Amendment speech rights. The case turned on whether the non-profit was a, quote, state actor, end quote, running a platform governed by First Amendment constraints. In a decision written by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, the conservative justices ruled that the First Amendment constraints didn't apply to the non-profit, which they considered a private entity. Providing a forum for speech wasn't enough to become a government actor, the justices ruled. We know the reasoning. They are a private enterprise. They had not yet really crossed the threshold into a government actor, so the First Amendment constraints did not apply to them, but the dissenting opinions did not agree with that. The liberal justices on the court, in a dissenting ruling, argued instead that the terms under which the non-profit ran the channels for the city should have bound it to First Amendment constraints. The non-profit, Justice Sonia Sotomayor wrote, quote, stepped into the city's shoes and thus qualifies as a state actor subject to the First Amendment like any other, end quote. And so the obvious question that everyone out there should be asking themselves, above and beyond the potentially problematic relationship between arguably a monopoly with access to 2.5 billion people out there, colluding, cooperating with the government to control the information being diffused to the general public to make sure only authoritative news is getting out there while censoring information that a year later they have to retract that censorship on, above and beyond all of that, the question people should be asking themselves is whether or not this private enterprise has now officially stepped into the shoes of the government such that it has become a government actor and should lose any form of Section 230 immunity. To be determined, to be discussed in greater detail with Robert Barnes during our next live stream on Sunday. And if you like my videos, you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, and drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
You can do it. Feed me, Seymour.
If you want to support the channel, all of these support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube membership. We've got merch. And if you thought you were not going to see Barney during this vlog, he has been here sleeping like a baby the entire time. Robert Barnes and I do weekly live streams every Sunday. We do weekly streams with a guest every Wednesday called The Sidebar. Tune in for that. If you want to support us, we are also on Locals. And if you don't know where to find us there, it is at...
Oh, man, one of these days I'll get this right. There we go. Viva BarnesLaw.locals.com.
All of my content is also on Rumble, so you can check it out there. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out. Booyah!